This video, I'm not going to be touching on Daniel 11, though I might share a few thoughts. I'm going to be doing something that's kind of been inspired by um, the writer of this book. In fact, this book, Ivor Myers writes this book. It's entitled The Coming King of the North, Understanding Daniel 11, verses 40 to 45. I've read first few chapters and it's so far a very interesting book. And it's kind of inspired me to do something where my attempt to break down Daniel 11 is concerned. He gives kind of like a brief overview of chapters 1 through to 10. I'm not sure if he touches on chapter 12 yet because I've not got to that point in his book. So that's what I'm going to do. I agree with probably everything that he said. He comes across very clear in the way that he describes those chapters. There are a few things that I see that he hasn't described, though, that he hasn't broken down, and I'd like to, in this hopefully short video, go through chapters 1 to 10 very, very quickly, not rushing, but I'd like to share some thoughts, and I'm hoping that this video will inspire you guys to study through some of the things that I'm suggesting are to be found in those chapters. What Ivor Myers says is that the book of Daniel is all about the great controversy, and that's true. In the book of Revelation, which basically prophesies events pertaining to the church, leading right through until, reaching up until, even beyond the second coming to the final establishment of the earth made new. In that particular book, that is the book of Revelation, you've got spiritual Babylon. You've got the city of Babylon representing the enemies of God's people. So in the book of Revelation, it's not the literal city in the last days that will trouble God's people, because the literal city was destroyed a long, long, long time ago, and it was never to be rebuilt. So Babylon, in a spiritual sense, represents the enemy or the enemies of God's people. In the book of Daniel, you've got literal Babylon and stories that describe how God's literal people at the time, the Israelites, were affected by the things that literal Babylon did. So how we better understand what spiritual Babylon does to God's people, that is the enemies of God's people, the enemy of God's people, how that enemy, those enemies will trouble God's people in these last days, just before Jesus comes, we can understand better looking through the book of Daniel. Who are the spiritual people of God in these last days? Who are spiritual Israel? Remember, literal Israel, just as literal Babylon, just as literal Babylon, put it this way, doesn't exist anymore. You'd be hard-pressed to find out who the literal Israelites are. There are different ideas as to who they are. I agree with some. I don't agree with others. But basically, my point is this, and I'm trying to avoid rambling. I'll probably fail to a certain degree. Literal Jerusalem and literal Israel as a nation, that is where it is situated, the actual nation itself, it's not the focal point now. If you accept Jesus, according to Galatians 3 and verse 29, you become a spiritual Israelite. You become part of Israel, but in a spiritual sense, not in a literal sense. We're not circumcised after the flesh anymore. We experience the circumcision of the heart, which is a removal of sin from the heart by the grace of God through the power of the gospel that is basically empowered by God. The power of the gospel is the power of God. It's the power of God unto salvation, according to, I think it's Romans chapter 1, verses 16 or 17. So let's go through very quickly Daniel chapters 1 through to 10. I'm just going to fly through them. As I said, I'm not going to rush, but I'd like to hopefully prompt you to do some homework. Chapter 1 highlights Nebuchadnezzar coming to Jerusalem in around 605 BC. He takes Jerusalem. God gives Jerusalem into his hand, that is Nebuchadnezzar's hand. He takes a number of Israelites of the royal household from Jerusalem to Babylon. He tests them in different ways. He's not seeking to attack them. He wants them to do well because he wants them to serve him in his kingdom. So he's doing what he thinks is best for them. He changes their names, which to a certain degree is an attack upon their character, because to the Hebrew a name represents character. But he also changes their diet, or he attempts to introduce to them a different way of eating. In verse 8 of chapter 1, I'm thinking that I may have to do a couple of videos to kind of give an overview of the chapters, because this one's going into almost 6 minutes now, and I don't want to make too long a video. So Daniel, in chapter 1 and verse 8, purposes in his heart that he doesn't want to defile himself. He's not going to defile himself with the king's meat or the wine which he drank. Now, what made it possible for Daniel to do this was the fact that he had hidden the word in his heart. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against you, or that I might not defile myself. That's Psalm 119 and verse 11. So when offered that which defiled, Daniel was able to point out the defiling elements of the diet, because he had hidden the word in his heart. My point is this: on a practical level, Daniel wouldn't have been in a position to purpose in his heart if he hadn't first of all hidden the word in his heart, because man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. So Daniel is able to purpose in his heart because he has taken time to hide the word in his heart. And Paul says to the Corinthians, I'm not sure where it is, but do a search for it. He basically, and I'm paraphrasing, says, whatever you do, it might be chapter 8 and verse 31 or chapter 5 and verse 31, I'm not too sure, but I know it's in either 1st or 2nd Corinthians, nearer to the verses that I've just referred to. And Paul basically says, and you'll find it quite easily if you do a search, that whatever you do, whatever you eat and drink, do it all to the glory of God. And this is a test for God's people, Daniel and his friends, and not just them, but other Israelites in Babylon, as described in chapter 1. And the reason I'm highlighting the do it all to the glory of God in relation to eating and drinking is because a test came the Israelites' way, as described in chapter 1, that related to eating and drinking. And God says, whatever you eat and drink, do it all to the glory of God. So where am I going with this? That connects Daniel chapter 1 to the first angel's message experientially. So it's not just about preaching the first angel's message, it's living the first angel's message. And Daniel chapter 1 gives us a window into how to live the first angel's message. And one more point before I'm just going to have to make Daniel chapter 1 a one video thing, and hopefully go through chapters 2 through to 10 in one, maybe 2 videos, but we'll see how it goes. One thing that chapter 1 highlights is the fact that God is trying to work upon Nebuchadnezzar. Other people, the whole of Babylon, yes, but let's look at Nebuchadnezzar for a moment. We often put our trust in things that aren't trustworthy. Nebuchadnezzar didn't give them the wine which he drank or the meat which he ate to attack them. He felt that it was the best thing that he could do for them, dietary-wise, if that makes sense. So Nebuchadnezzar doesn't want to hurt them. He doesn't know better. He's giving them what he puts his trust in relation to eating and drinking. He trusts his diet. Well, why would he eat it? Basically, what I'm trying to show you is this. Not only does the first angel's message play out experientially in chapter 1, we're also given insight into the fact that God is trying to show Nebuchadnezzar that you can't trust what you eat. And this is what God wants to do, and you'll see it as the story progresses, that God is trying to remove from Nebuchadnezzar's life that which he has put his trust in that's not trustworthy, if that makes sense. And this is what God wants to do for us all. He wants to remove from our lives the things that we trust in that aren't him, basically. After the 3 years of training Nebuchadnezzar, he's given a witness pertaining to the health message, because Nebuchadnezzar, he tests the different captives and finds that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah are 10 times better than their fellows. And he, as a wise king, is going to say, well, what's the difference? What did they do differently? And I'm sure Melzar would have had to have owned up to the fact that they ate differently. And so you've got a testimony there in relation to the importance and significance and power of the health message, really. Not only in the fact that it helps you if you live by it, but it's a great witness to those who witness you living by it, or the results of you living by it. I'm going to end this video there. There's so much more I could share. And at the beginning of the video, I was saying it would be a very brief overview, but that's gone out the window. I'm hoping that which I've shared has inspired people to read through chapter 1, and I'm going to be doing a video, hopefully touching on chapters 2 to 10. as soon as. God bless you all and pray for me as I pray for you.